Let's bring in MS Now senior national security reporter David Rohde, former deputy special envoy for Iran Richard Nephews, and retired U.S. Army Lieutenant General Mark Hertling. And first, let me start with you, David, because we have some conflicting messages. CENTCOM says the blockade has been fully implemented, but the president, in another post this morning, says that he is fully reopening the strait. So which is it? Give us a reality check.
So I think it's true that the ships are not going in and out of Iranian ports. That's the main goal. That's what CENTCOM said they wanted to achieve. Well, what the key for this strategy to work is that other ships start coming out. Ships from friendly countries to the U.S., from Kuwait, the United Arab Emirates, some of those tankers that have been waiting for so long can start bringing oil out from there. That's not happening because a lot of ship companies, not in large numbers, are worried about mines. They're worried about Iranian drone attacks. So the U.S. has set up a blockade, but it hasn't set up convoys to escort those tankers, so that's the problem. And I just want to flag one thing the president said. I think they want to deal very badly. He's been saying that for weeks. And I was sort of talking...
He's been saying the war's almost over for weeks also.
And look, I hope, he's right, and I hope this war ends quickly, but there's a belief, and there was a statistic that Admiral Cooper mentioned, that cutting off closing the seaports will end 90% of Iran's trade with the outside world is via sea routes. That's true in terms of dollars because we're talking about a lot of oil. All kinds of food and other materials comes in by land. They have borders with Turkey and Iraq and Pakistan and Afghanistan. So I worry the administration is overestimating how quickly they're going to buckle. Because over and over again, the Iranians have showed, we bombed them. Now we're cutting off their ports. But they are defiant, and they're tough negotiators. So I think, and I had one person tell me yesterday that the blockade, it could take weeks of blockading Iranian ports for Iran to make major concessions.
So let's talk about what that could look like in practicality. General, you wrote a piece for The Bulwark breaking down what this blockade of the Iranian ports and coastline means for the Navy strategically as far as resources used to implement it. What goes into maintaining this blockade?
A lot, Anna, that's all I can say. A lot goes into it. And this is a limited blockade. It's not a complete blockade of the sea areas around it. But as David just said, there are things that go on, and I think most Americans believe a blockade is like a wall that you can't get in and out. But David just mentioned the escort of ships. That's critical. The continuous mine sweeping, that's critical. The intelligence collection, the overhead cover from aircraft, all of the things that protect the force, the potential air defense that the ships have to provide in case of any firing by Iran on merchant vessels. So all of those things are important. When you just say blockade, it seems like a very simple task, but there are literally thousands of sailors involved in this and dozens of ships potentially if you do the escort mission as well as the minesweeping mission and the protection mission. So it does take a lot, and it's very costly. But I'd add one more thing to this. While we, the United States and CENTCOM, are blocking the Iranian ports from goods coming in, it's also blocking goods from going out. And that's going to continue to affect the world's economy in a very bad way. There's a lot of countries waiting for those goods, especially the oil, especially in areas like Asia. So this is going to have global effects on a supply chain around the world.
We know that reopening the strait is a key priority right now for the administration because of those economic impacts. There are reports, Richard, that mediators are moving closer to extending the ceasefire. The president told the New York Post in an interview that additional peace talks could be happening over the next 2 days. Does all that suggest progress has actually been made when it comes to some kind of a deal? Does that mean there are actually new developments to discuss?
I don't think so. I think it basically means that everyone is more concerned about the consequences of what would happen if the ceasefire were to break down. For all the reasons that we've been discussing right now, there are a lot of interests at stake, both in the United States, Gulf Arab states, and in Iran, and not having a resumption of the sorts of attacks that were taking place. And the Iranians absolutely still have the ability to land missiles and drones in Gulf Arab states. They absolutely have the ability to continue causing damage, just as the United States and Israel have the ability to cause damage inside of Iran. So the idea that there is a desire to extend the ceasefire makes complete sense to me, but it's not a demonstration that we're moving towards some kind of deal, because there are still very real issues that would make that pretty difficult.
General, the president says the war with Iran is close to over. And here's a little bit more from his interview with Fox Business. Watch.
They have no Navy. They have no Air Force. Everything's been wiped out. They have no anti-aircraft equipment. They have no radar. They have no leaders. The leaders they have now, it's a new regime, okay? And we find them pretty reasonable, to be honest with you. By comparison, pretty reasonable. It really is a new regime. And I think we're doing very well, but it only matters what the end result is, and maybe it'll happen fairly soon. Who knows?
Trump saying fairly soon. We've heard that language from the president before, as we were just discussing with David. Do you believe him, General?
I'm going to cite something a mentor once told me. If you want a new idea, read an old book. Over the last couple of days, I've been reading an old book about the Iran-Iraq war. This was a war where Iraq thought they could bluster themselves into a fight. They could push over the Iranian government because it was in turmoil. It had bad finances. It had new leadership in the first Ayatollah regime after the 79 revolts. But for 8 years, that war went on because Iran, for some odd reason, seemed to pull it together and bring their nation together. It's a tough piece of terrain. There's a lot of dangers in this area. They hide weapons all over a very large country. And, you know, what Iraq found in that 8-year war was they were always surprised by the resilience of the Iranian government and the Iranian people. So, no, in my view, this war is not going to be over very quickly.
And David, we heard him say this is a new regime, and he called them pretty reasonable. But your reporting and others suggest otherwise.
It's false. There is not a new regime. The current supreme leader of Iran is the son of the last supreme leader of Iran. And as we've talked about, so the current supreme leader, his father was killed in this initial airstrike by Israel and the U.S., his wife and one of his children. He's also, reported to be maimed. But all of the current leaders that are in the government, they're IRGC. They're very hardline. So it's not a new regime. They're not changing their negotiating position. So, I want to say this rarely, but that claim by the president is false.
Richard, the Wall Street Journal is reporting that Europe is accelerating a fallback plan in the event that the president decides to pull the United States out of NATO. And he's hammering on NATO again this morning. Of course, pulling out of NATO would require congressional approval. But what do you view as the repercussions if the U.S. did withdraw from this alliance?
Well, it'd be terrible. It'd be terrible in terms of our ability to deter further Russian aggression into Europe. And that obviously is the first and foremost responsibility of NATO. But it also would demonstrate a real loss of the U.S. ability to lead partners and allies. And that has been ultimately our greatest ability to both project power as well as to work against our adversaries over the course of the last few decades. And I think the last thing it would also demonstrate is that we've lost the ability to demonstrate that the kinds of issues, the kinds of priorities that we have are meaningful and that we have strategies and solutions to address them. Withdrawing from NATO because we can't get NATO allies to join us in a war they had no consultation in fighting and is causing them significant economic progress. It's a demonstration of our failures, and it would be seen as such, and I think it would be seen as such by our adversaries.
In general, China has been silent for some time, but then recently has grown louder, calling the U.S. blockade dangerous and irresponsible. The president, in his post just this morning, says he is now opening the strait for China. I wonder, has this whole crisis, this war the U.S. launched with Iran, changed global power dynamics?
Yes, it certainly has, Anna. It is shifting quite a bit of things that are not only becoming chaotic, but also somewhat dysfunctional. You see that the administration put out a national security strategy several months ago, followed by a national defense strategy, saying China was their biggest adversary, basically saying we didn't need allies either, that allies had to work for themselves in their specific area of operation. Both of those things have now been proven false. China is not an adversary. It appears like they're being welcomed into the fold, and the president is bending over for them to get them back into the Straits because he knows how powerful and how important oil is to the Chinese government, and how he has to meet with President Xi here shortly. So all of these things are disrupting, and I'll give one more lesson I learned a long time ago. Words are important, so we ought to be precise when we talk about these kind of things. And the last thing we're seeing in some of the dealings with Iran and other nations in the world is precision in what we're messaging. And information is an important part of national power, and we seem to be squandering it right now.